Victory to the mother. Victory to VVVVV. Victory to Teletarchai in the name of the secret master. Victory to Baphomet and his disciples. Victory to the Lord, the supreme initiator. Victory, victory, victory to To Megatherion. Victory to the most supreme initiator. Victory to the brothers who dwell in the city of the pyramids. Victory, victory to the beast and the scarlet woman. Victory, victory to the perfect Illuminatus. Victory to the master who grants success. Victory to Agape. Victory to Thelema. Victory, victory to the law of Thelema. Victory, victory to the prophet of the law. Victory, victory to the bride of chaos. Victory, victory to her who fulfills all desires. Victory, victory to her who rides upon the beast. Victory, 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 victory to the name, the mother of abominations. The topic of my talk today is one seems widely avoided in public communications by contemporary Thelemites, although it is one that looms hugely in the writings of Aleister Crowley throughout his career as a magician. If we read the confessions of our past patriarch Baphomet, it is a recurring and unavoidable fact that he takes as given the reality of the secret chiefs and their involvement in his life. Although Crowley declared himself an atheist on any number of occasions, his memoirs show the secret chiefs to be the higher power to which he attributed his accomplishments and his difficulties. In Magic Without Tears, a chapter that recounts anecdotes regarding the influence of the secret chiefs mentions that they might, with equal validity, be called the masters or the gods. Now, Crowley writes, the masters, the secret chiefs of the order to which he owed his first initiation, are the directors of the spiritual destinies of this planet. But Crowley's accounts of his dealings with them are largely a matter of synchronistic developments which he interpreted as their manipulation, or of communications received by him and his collaborators in visionary states of profoundly altered awareness from such entities as Aiwaz, Abuldiz, Amalantra, and Hermes Ami. It is perhaps little matter to someone living a century later that these masters proved to Crowley, by his own lights, a firm skeptic accustomed to mathematical and scientific methods of criticism, their own existence and their possession of power and knowledge far exceeding anything hitherto conceived as human, beyond all possibility of doubt. He later wrote, "Since they are invisible and inaccessible, may they not merely be figments invented by a self-styled master, not quite sure of himself, to prop his tottering authority?" Indeed, they might. But Crowley never admits to having had such doubts during his work under the direction of MacGregor Mathers in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Their existence was in fact necessary to his own self-image as an honorable man. He wrote, Mathers and Westcott claimed to be working under one or more secret chiefs of the grade of 8=3. It was then to those chiefs that I and the other members of the order were pledged, so that when he first split with the other adepts of the Rosicrucian order within the Golden Dawn, and then later from Mathers himself, Crowley could persist in what he saw as his original loyalty. Note that the neophyte obligation that Crowley published in the Equinox refers simply and only to the chiefs of the order, and even this reference is absent from the original cipher manuscript, which simply mentions a sourceless current of will. It does, however, give SDA, or Fräulein Sprengel, as a chief among the members of the Goldene Dämmerung. And yet, the notion of secret chiefs, or hidden masters, seems to have been part of the culture of the Golden Dawn, as fostered by Westcott and Mathers. So where did the Golden Dawn get this idea? Much of the founding membership of the order, including Westcott and Mathers themselves, had been active in the Hermetic Society of Anna Kingsford. This organization was first incubated in the London Lodge of the Theosophical Society under Kingsford's presidency. The creation of a separate Hermetic Society reflected a division between those increasingly focused on esoteric Buddhism who remained among the Theosophists, and the so-called Hermetic wing, more interested in the Western mysteries, Rosicrucianism, esoteric Christianity, and so forth. From the inception of the Theosophical Society, Madame Blavatsky and its other organizers claimed to be working under the instruction of hidden adepts, even at that earliest phase, when Theosophy had still barely detached itself from the milieu of American spiritualism. John King was a spirit control of Blavatsky's, what later occultists might term a channeled entity. John King was first presented to Theosophical co-founder Colonel Olcott as a master, but was later demoted to a messenger of the masters. And at this preliminary stage, the Orientalist inclinations of Theosophy were directed to Egypt. Later, when these were transferred to Asia, the masters gained the title Mahatmas, or Great Souls. Key Theosophical Mahatmas included Kuthumi and Moria, but there were many others. Blavatsky described the Mahatmas in her correspondence to London Theosophist A.P. Sinnett, with a quotation from Tennyson's Wakeful Dreamer as follows: "How could ye know him? Ye were yet within the narrower circle. He had well nigh reached the last, which, with a region of white flame, pure without heat, into larger air upburning, and an ether of black blue, invests and ingirds all other lives." In 1884, the Society for Psychical Research, an English academy founded largely by Theosophists, mounted an investigation of Blavatsky's claims of contact with the masters. They focused on charges of conjuring tricks used by Blavatsky to produce magical phenomena and apported or mysteriously materialized correspondence at the Adyar headquarters of the Society in India. The committee's conclusions were damning. And ever since then, those with opinions on the Mahatmas seem to be divided between the credulous believers, for whom these masters are nearly ineffable realities, and the scornful skeptics who take them to have been purely fictions. A very useful exception can be found in the research of K. Paul Johnson, who takes a middle route of considering that these were perhaps real men and women advancing intellectual, social, and political reforms, whose identities were willfully obscured by the conjuring antics and fabulous reputations alike. Johnson notes, for instance, the actual person, Joseph Maximilian Bimstein, a Polish Kabbalist and magician who worked with Blavatsky in Cairo and later served in London as the Grand Master of the exterior circle for the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, linking that order's governing initiates with an interior circle of hidden adepts, eventually understood to include both incarnate and disincarnate agents. As we read from a Theosophical text of 1889, the SPR now denies completely the existence of Mahatmas. They say that from beginning to end, they were a romance which Madame Blavatsky has woven from her own brain. Well, she might have done many things much less clever than this. At any rate, we have not the slightest objection to this theory. As she always says now, she almost prefers that people should not believe in the masters. She declares openly that she would rather people should seriously think that the only Mahatma land is the gray matter of her brain, and that, in short, she has evolved them out of the depths of her own inner consciousness. than that their names and grand ideal should be so infamously desecrated as they are at present. At first, she used to protest indignantly against any doubts to their existence. Now, she never goes out of her way to prove or disprove it. Let people think what they like. Outside of Theosophy, there are other possible taproots for the Golden Dawn's teaching about the secret chiefs. One is the traditions of German Rosicrucianism. The Golden Edemerung of the cipher manuscripts, which provided the initiatory plan for the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, may have been a body of the Golden und Rosenkreutzer, a lodge-based Rosicrucianism of 18th century Germany. These used a system of grades based on the Kabbalistic Sephiroth and focused their practical attentions on the work of alchemical magic and mysticism. Both the deep Rosicrucian and alchemical traditions emphasize the possibility and desirability of aspirants being contacted by mysterious adepts with knowledge otherwise unavailable. Another 18th century order with teachings comparable to and competing with those of the Gold- und Rosenkreutzer was the Ritters des Licht, or Knights of Light, later known as the Asiatic Brethren, and as the Brotherhood of Light, whom we claim among the sources of traditional knowledge in the sanctuaries of OTO. Also in 18th century Germany, the Strict Observance Order of Baron von Hunt popularized a Neo-Templar Freemasonry. Von Hunt alleged to receive his authority from, quote, unknown superiors. And he eventually had to compete with other organizers who claimed to be instructed by these unknown superiors as well or better than he was. Still, this notion, so successfully fostered by von Hunt, was perpetuated in many of the more esoteric strains of high-grade Freemasonry, including the rectified Scottish Rite, which is yet another tributary of the OTO initiatory system. The rectified Scottish Rite, however, was also a manifestation of the Martinist tradition. And in 19th century Martinism, we see appeals to the superieur inconnu, or unknown superiors, invoked as the means of transmission of the secret doctrines and methods of Martinism, from Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin, himself called the unknown philosopher, to the much later founders of the Martinist order, among whom was Gerard Uncos, later Supreme and Holy King of OTO in France, and later still a saint of our Gnostic Catholic Church. When Uncos created the lodge-based Martinist system, he made superieur inconnu the title of the third degree of that system. And Crowley and Mathers, conferring in Paris, appear to have been influenced by the initiatory techniques of Martinism when they contemplated reforms for the Golden Dawn temples, which would include the custom of masking to filter out the undesirable effects of personal affection and prestige of character in the initiatory ceremonies. These reforms were never implemented in the Golden Dawn. All of this history aside, Crowley was prepared in advance for the idea of the secret chiefs by his first direct informant regarding the course to chart in occultism. Fresh from a reading of the Book of Black Magic and Pacts, Crowley had written to Arthur Edward Waite, requesting from this expert what he should best study and how to receive initiated instruction. Waite simply directed Crowley to a little book, The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary by Karl von Eckartshausen. And when Crowley wished to give what he called an account of AA to aspirants, that is to say, an account of the Collegium Summum, the third and highest order in his scheme of initiatory spiritual development, he simply edited the second letter or chapter of The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. For Eckartshausen's phrase, a clear idea of the interior church, Crowley merely substituted a clear idea of the interior order. Eckartshausen originally wrote, all exterior societies subsist through this interior one giving them its spirit. As soon as external societies wish to be independent of the interior one and to transform a temple of wisdom into a political edifice, the interior society retires and leaves only the letter without the spirit. It is thus that secret external societies of wisdom are nothing but hieroglyphic screens, the truth remaining inviolable in the sanctuary, so that she might never be profaned. Note, too, that this counselor Eckartshausen was himself a product of the 18th century esoteric milieu. He was trained in Bavaria for the Jesuit order in Ingolstadt, studying under no less a teacher than Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati order and a saint of our church. But Eckartshausen was a monarchist and a theocrat, and when he discovered the ambitions of the Illuminati to promote secular republicanism, he quit them entirely, and thereafter refused all secret initiations, even those of the Rosicrucian and the Asiatic Brethren, with whom he would have had more ideological sympathy. Now, despite Crowley's abundant efforts to fashion outer and inner orders for the collegium summum of AA that would call few and choose many to lead to that ultimate mystical brotherhood, Eckartshausen's original and Crowley's own edited text both admonish that the true interior church knows none of the formalities which belong to the outer rings, the work of man. Although Crowley said he had been received among the secret chiefs in a visionary episode in Japan in April of 1906, and then formally invited to take his place officially as a secret chief that December, it was not until 1909, after the experiences documented in The Vision and the Voice, that he accepted a place among the secret chiefs. And those experiences presented to him the community of the Third Order not as a church, but as a city. The city of the pyramids, where those who have attained to mastery dwell in the night of Pan. So, in contemplating this topic, one angle that had occurred to me would be to address the question, how do you become a secret chief? But of course the answer to that is simple. You complete the adventure of the abyss so that nobody arrives in the city of the pyramids. Because the master of the temple must have annihilated his or her prior personality. And therefore, those who accomplish that attainment are Nemo, or no one at all. And there is no path to that station. The mystic Ivan Vladimirovich Lopukin was a Russian contemporary of Eckartshausen's, and in his book on the characteristics of the interior church, he identifies the annihilation of the ego with the entry into the interior church. And likewise, he points to the quote-unquote pure disinterested love, which it is a task of the master of the temple to manifest. Still, in keeping with the Gethsemane cry, "Not my will, but thine," Lopukin treats the human will as irreconcilable with the divine, and attaching only to the ego, rather than to that true self, which the ego's personality limits and oppresses. Perhaps such a teaching was suited to aspirants in the old eon. Lopukin's interior church, however, does not differ from the city of the pyramids in our doctrines when it comes to the detachment needed in aspiring to it. It is not enough to refrain from searching for this condition, he writes, but the entrance to it must even be feared. As Crowley recounts in the Vision of the 14th Ether, "Bowed are their backs whereon resteth the universe. Veiled are their faces that have beheld the glory ineffable. Herein no forms appear, and the vision of God face to face, that is transmuted in the Athanor called dissolution, or hammered into one forge of meditation, is in this place but a blasphemy and a mockery. And it is this of which it is written, unto thee shall be granted joy, and health, and wealth, and wisdom, when thou art no longer thou. Then shall every gain be a new sacrament, and it shall not defile thee. Thou shalt revel with the wanton in the marketplace, and the virgins shall fling roses upon thee. The merchants bend their knees and bring thee gold and spices. Also young boys shall pour wonderful wines for thee, and the singers and the dancers shall sing and dance for thee, yet thou shalt not be therein, for thou shalt be forgotten, dust lost in dust. And this same city of the pyramids is referenced by some Sufi mystical schools under the figure of the Tavern of Ruin, which is the community of those who have undergone annihilation. It is also represented by Lopukin in an allegory of the Hebrew temple, just as it had been previously in the apocalyptic writings of the followers of Jacob Boehme. But let us return to the matter of visions and synchronicities by which Crowley understood himself to be manipulated by the secret chiefs. In the chapter on how to recognize masters in Magic Without Tears, Crowley draws several anecdotes on these lines from his confessions. In particular, he describes the clairvoyant guidance from the wizard Abuldiz that enabled him and Mary Desti to find the Villa Caldorazzo outside of Rome as a refuge where work could begin on Book 4. He also relates an episode from 1920 in which he demanded a sign from the secret chiefs, feeling in despair about his work at that time. After an apt I Ching divination, he was presented by Jane Charon in an unrelated visit to her with a large silk reproduction of the Stele of Revealing. It was episodes like these that caused Crowley to declare, "I am walking not by faith, but by sight in my relations with the secret chiefs." But the chief illustration that Crowley used for the methods of the secret chiefs in ordering his affairs was the rediscovery of the manuscript of the Book of the Law in the attic of Boleskine House, June 28th, 1909. Crowley insisted that the secret chiefs had arranged for him to have a house guest with a love of skiing, so that Crowley would be led to discover, beneath his old skis, some Enochian papers, and below those, the manuscript. Nor, if we are to believe the accounts of those still living, have the secret chiefs lost interest in the disposition of the manuscript of the Book of the Law. The curious article, Raiders of the Lost Basement, by Tom Whitmore, recounts the author's discovery of a hoard of Crowley papers in the basement of a house he had recently purchased. Whitmore wasn't entirely sure what he had, but recognizing it as Crowley, he consulted an OTO member of his acquaintance, and in short order found himself talking to Bill Heydrich, and then to Israel Regardie. Ultimately, for very little personal reward, Whitmore returned to the OTO a considerable number of pieces of original correspondence and Crowley manuscripts, including the authorizations to Grady McMurtry, known as the Caliphate Letters, an OTO charter from the 1920s, and the original manuscript of the Book of the Law. Some of these, to be sure, though perhaps not all, had been stolen in a house robbery from Carl Germer's widow, but their delivery to this basement is still a mystery. Whitmore writes, "The one lead we had as to how the papers got into the basement turned out to be false. We may never know." From Whitmore's perspective, these events were a little windfall and a quote-unquote story to dine out on. But from the perspective of the organizers of OTO, the recovery of the manuscript of Liber Legis affirmed the continuity of the order and the currency of our mission through a very tangible approbation from the secret chiefs. More recently, with the 65 pages of the manuscript duly locked up in a safe repository by and for the order, the prophet's own handwriting appeared again from an unexpected quarter to effect our custodianship of the text of the law. There is a complicated editorial history of the verse paraphrase of the Stele of Revealing, inserted in the text according to the instructions of Aiwaz in the Cairo working. The verses themselves do not appear in the holograph manuscript. They were to be garnered from another notebook, where Crowley had already written them prior to the April reception. But that notebook has never been recovered. As mentioned earlier, Crowley himself lost the larger manuscript for some years prior to 1909. And there are a variety of parallel and supplementary texts that problematize the one line of verse beginning with Aum. Virtually all 20th century editions of Book 220, Chapter 3, Verse 37, give the line as Aum, let it fill me. But the separate publication of the verses from the stele in the Equinox number 7, and in earlier proofs for Crowley's collected works, and in later volumes under Crowley's editorship, all have instead Aum, let it kill me. Now, there are a variety of interesting considerations and arguments that have been made concerning this inconsistency, and it is beyond the scope of this talk for me even to gloss them. However, I will observe that the original holograph, where the word fill appears, is a pencil marking by Crowley after the reception of the book, but prior to its publication, and prior to other publications of the stele verses. So, our OTO Frater Superior was laboring in 2013 on the still forthcoming new edition of the Holy Books of Thelema, and he was not at liberty to passively contemplate this dilemma. As an editor, he had to make a decision. And the more he had learned about the editorial history of the text, the more difficult and less obvious the decision had become. And it was at that very point that the OTO again recovered some of the order's important historical properties. James Thomas Windram had been Crowley's OTO viceroy for South Africa, and his surviving son very generously returned some papers, books, and regalia to the OTO archives. Among these was the very copy of Thelema, that is the 1909 Holy Books volume, that had served as Crowley's own desk copy between 1909 and 1913. It includes a variety of penciled corrections, most of them already adopted in later editions of the Holy Books, but it also clearly corrects fill to kill. Now, the receipt of this information, again, from an entirely unlooked-for quarter, is not only another case of synchronistic providence concerning the law, where the secret chiefs might have arranged for the restoration of the text at a time when it could finally be corrected with sufficient transparency and promulgated at adequate speed. It is the written instruction of one who was a secret chief himself, Aleister Crowley, after 1909. Now, when I have spoken on this topic of the interior church previously at a gathering for EGC clergy, I was approached afterwards by several attendees. And they wanted to know what I really thought about the secret chiefs. This history of ideas is all very well, and the stuff about Crowley is interesting, but what do you actually think about the reality of the secret chiefs? They wanted to know. And since I told them, I suppose I might as well share it with you too. I am pleased to be able to claim Dr. Marco Passi as a personal acquaintance. He is an accomplished scholar of modern occult movements, and in his excellent study of Crowley's political involvements, Dr. Passi observes that the secret chiefs and their various counterparts or homologues, whether they are construed as the interior circle, the Mahatmas, the unknown superiors, the hidden adepts, or what have you, that these all function in a way that is mechanically similar to the conspiracy theory. But rather than indicating a menacing influence that orchestrates the chaos of the world and makes us into victims, the secret chiefs are supposed to be benevolent, developing humanity's latent potentials and rescuing the world from the wrong turns of human society. Passi seems to think that the secret chiefs are a great consolation, a style of eunoia in esoteric rhetoric to balance or counteract the paranoia so often fostered in our modern world. But that doesn't mean they're real. Crowley, ever sure of their reality, insisted they may be incarnate or disincarnate. It is a matter of their convenience. And he also remarked that the system of grades in the outer GD and inner RC orders that he organized for attainment is only one of many such systems superintended by the secret chiefs. For myself, I live in a world where it seems that the heavens stretch away just as far as the hells. Considering any person I have met who has seemed to me to be the most contemptible, the most delusional, powerless, self-absorbed, worthless bag of crap. I imagine there must be one who exceeds my integrity, my insight and capabilities, and my concern for humanity by at least as much as mine exceed that of the miserable wretch. And I suppose this one must have peers, and that these are capable of recognizing one another as the secret chiefs of whom Eckartshausen and Crowley wrote. But does that mean that I fret myself with the possibility that yonder beggar is a king seeking for hidden masters under rocks and behind dumpsters? Not at all. As Crowley remarks, the secret chiefs have no difficulty getting your attention when they want it. If I already knew better than anyone else how the world should be and how to make it that way, if I had nothing to learn about the basis of reality and human destiny, then, if I were in fact an adept, I would be a black brother. Accursed. One who seals up the pylon with blood, who shuts himself off from the company of the saints, who keeps himself from compassion and understanding. And so instead, I seek to make myself a fit instrument for the designs of the secret chiefs, and to make myself sensitive to their direction. And it is my fervent wish and benediction that you will as well. Love is the law, love under will.